Welcome back, y'all, and happy Tuesday. Today, we're going to be breaking down the new version of college football with the playoffs expanding potentially to 14 or 16 teams. We'll talk about NIL, we'll talk about revenue sharing, and how all that impacts our Tennessee Volunteers. As always, y'all, please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. All right, y'all, let's talk about this new 14 or 16 team playoff model that's set to start in 2026. I am going to tell you which one I think it's actually going to be as we go through this, but we already know that the Big Ten and the SEC are in charge of all this stuff, and the ACC, the Big 12, and everybody else, they're just kind of, along for the ride. I would say that after 2031, once this 6-year contract expires, the SEC and the Big Ten are going to branch off and do their own thing, hand select whoever they want. And this is going to basically be like a 6-year showcase for everyone outside of the SEC and the Big Ten, maybe even for some of the lesser teams in the SEC and the Big Ten. I would say more so for the Big Ten because they've got a lot of teams in there that just aren't very good. But for the 14 or 16 team playoff, it's going to be 4 automatic bids for the SEC, and for the Big Ten, it's going to be 2 automatic bids for the ACC and for the Big 12. Notre Dame's going to get an auto bid if they're within the top 14 or 16 teams at the end of the season. Then there's going to be 1 Group of 5 conference champion. The highest ranked Group of 5 conference champion will also get an auto bid. Now, if you look at the 16 team playoff model, then right there, we're talking about potentially 3 at-large bids, and for the 14 team, it's only going to be 1 at-large bid. So what this means for SEC teams is we are expecting for us to move from an 8-game conference schedule to a 9-game conference schedule, which the other Power 4 conferences have already been doing, and we are expecting about $5 million in additional revenue heading towards each individual program inside of the SEC. Now, I don't think that that's quite enough money just because the SEC is so deep from top to bottom. The second best would be the Big Ten, and if you look at them last season in 2024, they had 4, maybe 5 teams, if you're being very generous, that were playoff caliber. In the SEC, it was like 8 to 10. So adding that one more game for me could have been worth double that $5 million. So we're talking about it really should be about $10 million per institution, but we'll see what actually ends up happening once all the contracts and stuff get laid out. So we are also expecting for the SEC and the Big Ten to do more cross-conference scheduling. So we're talking about much better, games every single week. It's not going to be the same UT Chattanooga and Kent States and UTEPs. There's going to be one more conference game plus another Big Ten game, and that will generate about $1.5 million for each SEC school and $1.3 million for each Big Ten school. And if you're looking at the 14-team playoff, we're not expecting any new TV contracts to come behind that with ESPN. But if we go to 16, then yeah, we're going to have to get that figured out, and there will be more money added to it. That's why I think that we're probably headed towards a 16-game playoff model in 2026. And these are the 14 teams that would have made the college football playoffs in 2024 if we were doing this 14-team playoff model. Now, I believe it's kind of the same format where the 4 highest conference champions will get their first round bye. So every team with an asterisk next to their name would be getting a bye. You see our Tennessee Volunteers are sitting at number 7, and I do believe that we will be hosting the first round game. This is how all the first round matchups would have looked, again, if we're going off of the 14-team playoff model in 2024. So we have Texas versus BYU, Ohio State versus SMU, Penn State versus Clemson, Notre Dame versus Alabama, our Volunteers versus Indiana. Again, we would be hosting, and every team that you see up at the top would be the hosting team. So I think that that's a really good look. Obviously, we, more than likely would have made it to the second round if this was the case. So you can see how this is already starting to benefit and favor Tennessee. And these are the 16 teams that would have made the college football playoffs in 2024 if we're on a 16-team playoff format. So number one thing here is that there will be no first round buys. And something that we haven't talked about up to this point is that there could be some sort of a play-in game or several play-in games, I guess, for the SEC and for the Big Ten. I don't know if you would do that for the ACC and for the Big 12 just because they only have 2 automatic bids, or for anyone else. So let's keep that in mind. But that's how that would look. And as we come on over to the next part of this, we can see the individual matchups. So first and foremost, our Tennessee Volunteers would be hosting SMU. That's a game that I think we all feel like we should be able to win, especially inside of Neyland. And then if you look at UGA versus Clemson, that's 2 conference champions right there. I think that the highest ranked conference champion would be the one that's hosting. So the same thing could be said about Arizona State versus Notre Dame. I think that Arizona State will be hosting Notre Dame. And there's a lot of really good matchups here, I think, for both of them. But like we talked about, I feel like the 16-team model is what they're going to want to go to just because that's where more money can be generated at. And that's what this whole thing is all about. I'm still not 100% sure just because the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be the ones that say what's going to go. This doesn't necessarily benefit the SEC anymore The one part of it, though, like we said, whenever you go from the 14 to the 16 team playoff, you're going from 1 at large to 3 at larges. So you get 2 more at larges within the 16 team format, and you're adding more SEC teams. Again, if you're just going off of last year's model. So these are my key takeaways from what we talked about today. Number one, the SEC and the Big Ten just got significantly stronger. Maybe the SEC a little bit more than the Big Ten, just because, as we spoke about, the SEC is a lot deeper from top to bottom. But having 4 automatic bids is going to be very enticing to any player, whether they're coming out of high school or in the transfer portal. You want to be able to compete for those national titles, and you can do it a lot easier in either of these conferences. Again, I think that it does favor the SEC even more, which favors our Tennessee Volunteers. Number 2 is that more money is going to be shared for everybody, right? More people are making more money. That's always a very big deal. I love to see people making money. I love to see people doing well. So this actually excites me. Some people might get upset to see these, young people, these young college players getting all this money. But hey, I feel like more power to them. However old you are, if you can make a whole lot of money inside of this country, I am all behind that. So number 3 is going to be depth at key positions is going to be at a premium. So we know that there's going to be some NIL caps. There's going to be revenue sharing models and things like that. And we spoke about that some in yesterday's video. So with all that being said, you're going to want to spend most of the money on the key positions. So a team like Tennessee is already off to a very good start because we have several very good backup quarterbacks behind Nico just for 2025. But in 2026, we're going to have Merck, we're going to have GMAC, and we're also going to have Faison Brandon. So that's 3 very good quarterbacks. And I think that every team would, want to try to replicate a model like that, but also pass rushers, offensive tackles, all of those spots. You want to make sure that you have really good quality depth because the season is going to be so much longer. If someone goes down, if they are, someone that you just cannot replace, then you're going to be in a really tough spot to be able to win these championships. And obviously winning championships, making it to the playoffs, all those things should end up meaning getting in more very high quality blue chip caliber players. So at number 4, I think that the backups will play more, again, because it's such a long season. It's not like the NFL where, they only have, like a 65-man roster or something like they don't have as many players on their roster as college football teams do. We are expecting for most teams to hold about 90 players. I feel like the younger players will get the opportunities to play. Also, because the games don't necessarily mean as much, but we will see more quality games. So that's another big deal. I feel like I love seeing really good football just because I'm a football junkie. Football is life for us here on this channel. So I love the idea of every single week you could have multiple really good matchups, gives you a whole lot of things to watch and break down. So that's a really good deal. I enjoy good quality football. I would much rather that than, like I said earlier, man, I don't really want to watch us playing against UT Chattanooga or Kent State or teams that we know that we're going to blow out. You can't learn nothing from that. The players aren't really getting any better from that. It doesn't really help anybody out outside of those smaller institutions that do get a nice amount of money from it, which I'm all for that as well. But I just kind of think that at this point, they probably need to, go to their own league and do their own thing. And hopefully they will have a large enough following that they can still generate the same amount of money without having to get beat up and things like that. And then too, something else, you want to be able to stay healthy over the course of the season. So I always stress out so much whenever we're playing up against some of these lesser teams. I don't want to see anybody go down in a game that just really doesn't even matter. You know what I'm saying? In a game that we can win with our second and third string players. So at number 6, like we kind of touched on before, losses have much less of an impact. Now, whenever this playoff model started, not even this one, but whenever the playoffs started, period, for college football, a lot of folks, including myself, felt like, man, that's just going to water everything down because the losses won't mean as much. You can lose a game, and it's not the end of your season. Before, whenever it was the BCS model, if you lost a game, your season was pretty much over. You needed a whole lot more help to make it to a national title. But now you can lose a game, which, obviously, in turn, everything else that we just talked about, you can play more players without having to worry about, oh my gosh, like if we lose and season's over with. You can get the players better earlier. And I think that all those things are very positive for the institutions, for the players themselves, and also for the NFL, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Number 7, I think the dynasties are back. I do feel like if you're one of these top 4 teams on a consistent basis, you can build up a lot more depth, and you can, every time that you make it to the playoffs, you have a chance to win a national title. So before, with the 12-team playoff, it wasn't the exact same way. And maybe it could have been if the format was more of the way that it's going to look right now. Maybe, that's possible, but it just wasn't set up like that. Now, I think it's more about the different formatting and not so much about more teams being added, but even still, more teams being added probably open up the door for the format to change up. So I like that thought. And, I also like the idea of, like we said, with the SEC, so many teams can still go out and get really good players. If you're like, one of those cusp top 4 SEC teams, hey, you can talk players into, look, we're right there. We just need you to come in and get us over that hump. And you can have, I think, plenty of parity as well. So, maybe it's a situation where the rich get richer, but I don't know if the poor necessarily would get poorer if you're just talking about the SEC. Now, maybe in some different conferences that could be true, but all I care about is the SEC because that's the conference that our Volunteers play, and I really don't care about everybody else. So that's a good look from our Volunteer standpoint. And then at number 8, I think that players will transfer less for all the reasons that we just mentioned. They're going to be making a lot of money with the revenue sharing, with the NIL, even with the NIL caps. We haven't seen what that looks like just yet, but if it's the way that we speculated on yesterday, they're going to be able to make plenty of money. They're going to be able to, play more. It's a longer season, and they're going to want to stick with the teams that are kind of, within that realm of, hey, we're a top 4 or 5 in the SEC, 7 or 8 team. You want to kind of stick it out, add a few pieces here and there. So I think that should bring a whole lot more passion back to the game and get it on a much more even playing field, something that a lot of people have been missing from this game. And then at number 9, we have that players will be more NFL ready for a million reasons because they're going to get to play earlier, and then they're also going to have a much longer season. Now, I've watched, I've listened to and all that type of stuff, several NFL players, several NFL coaches that say NFL players at some point in their NFL season, like by game 13, 14, 15, they start to hit a wall because they're not used to playing as long of a season. They're not used to playing as many games. With this model, with this situation, they're going to go into the NFL having played almost as many games as NFL teams have played, especially if you're one of these cusp playoff teams and you have to, go to the play-in game and all of that. So I like that idea of just getting these players better, getting them more ready. That's not only going to make the college football a better product, but I think it will also make the NFL a much better product heading all the way down the line. Now, at number 10, this is probably a negative for most people, but I do think that the spring games are going to be going away. I don't know if that really has too much to do necessarily with this new playoff model, but it's something that most coaches just don't like. What's the point in putting your players out there to potentially get injured? But also, you're giving a whole lot of film to these other coaches that want to get your players out of the transfer portal. You're kind of, you probably won't be showing them as much on the field with the different schemes and things like that. But anything that you put out there, I mean, teams will use it against you. So I think that because the season's going to be longer and everything else is kind of stacked up against the spring games where coaches already don't like it, that's probably going to end up going away. And yeah, we're all going to miss that because we want to see our players play, especially these freshmen. But if it helps us win, I'm okay with that. I just want to win on a consistent basis. That's where I'm at mentally. And the last thing, y'all, I feel like this will even out the playing field for the Big Ten and for the SEC. Maybe not so much for everybody else. But number one, like we've talked about several times, there will be an NIL cap. There's going to be a revenue sharing cap. So while teams can choose how they want to allocate funds to different spots on their roster, they're still working with the same amount of resources. That's what evens things out. And also, if you are, within the Big Ten, I would say like a top 6, 7, 8 team, then you have a chance to compete for a top 4 spot and be a championship caliber or a championship competing sort of a team. Now, in the SEC, it's going to be a lot deeper where we're talking about probably 10 to 12 teams can, say, hey, we're right on the cusp of getting into the playoffs. But if you make it to the college football playoffs, you have the chance to compete for that national title. And more NFL scouts are going to look at your players. They're going to have more time to watch them, more games to kind of break down what they're doing. And you'll probably get more players drafted. So those are all the things that most of the players coming out of high school or transferring, that's what they're looking for outside of how do you like the coaching staff? And everyone loves Tennessee's coaching staff. How do you like the atmosphere? What do you think about the fan base? All those types of things. Tennessee is leading. I think, you could put Tennessee on par with everybody in that category. There's not a team that's above Tennessee. As a matter of fact, some of these teams that have been ranked higher than Tennessee for several years, they are behind Tennessee in all those categories. But, oh, by the way, Tennessee does not have state taxes. So all the money that you're getting in Tennessee, Texas, Florida, it's going to go a lot longer. It's going to go a lot further than it will in some of these other places. So all these things, for me, it really benefits Tennessee because whenever you come up on campus and, you talk to our coaches, you look at how everything is set up, I have not seen not one single solitary player that I've ever talked to, not just read articles on, but that I've ever talked to personally, no parents, nothing, that have anything negative to say about Tennessee. So I think that we could, be in a spot where we are always in the college football playoffs, always competing for national titles, and everything should look a lot more consistent, a lot more stable now with all these new rules and things in place, and we can actually get them enforced. So those are my thoughts on it. Please share yours with me down in the comment section. Again, I think this is a great look for our Tennessee Volunteers. No reason for us, as Tennessee fans, to be upset about this. It just favors us in so many different ways. But please do share your thoughts with me down in the comment section. And as always, please do make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks. Peace.